Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. This is a reminder that I will be reading names for the Wave of Light again this year. If you're not familiar, the Wave of Light happens on October 15th every year at 7 p.m. in whatever time zone you are in. This is a way to light up the night to honor and remember all of our babies in the stars. If you would like your baby included, feel free to email me at sarah@journeyforjasmine.com, or you can also message me on any of my social media at journeyforjasmine. Today, I am talking with Megan. She is a fertility doula, a mother to 2 living children, and many babies in the stars. She is also a proud member of the 2SLGBTQIA+ community, a Swiftie, and an advocate for mental health support in the infertility community. In this episode, she shares about going through infertility and loss, along with the stereotypes and stigmas she and her wife were up against. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Megan. Megan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Megan. I'm a fertility doula. I'm a lost mom, and I'm a parent to 2 living children. Yeah, so I run a business called Choice Fertility, which was built very kind of organically out of the experiences that my wife and I had trying to conceive. Between the two of us had, gosh, one second trimester loss. We had, I honestly and somewhat depressingly lost count of the number of early losses that we had, but I think about 5 or 6. We had probably 8 or 9 IUIs between the two of us and a couple of rounds of IVF. So we've kind of run the gamut there and developed a lot of knowledge that we didn't necessarily want or expect to have as part of our journey. Because one of the stereotypes that even I had kind of internalized when you have a relationship involving 2 uteruses is that, you have a uterus and a spare. So like you're set. So we definitely didn't expect the journey that we had. And I'm now in this position of feeling like, we've been through all of this, we've learned all of these things, and I really want to do something with it. I want to help other people, so that their journeys are maybe a little bit easier than ours. So that's
Which I
where I'm
think is
coming from.
amazing that you're, wanting to help other people. Because yeah, I definitely know stuff I wish I never had to know. I don't want to know
Right?
this much about everything. Like I'd rather just be, oh, I want to get pregnant, I get pregnant, and that's all I need to know. But
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, jealousy can be such a big part of the journey, in lots of different ways. But one of the things I still find myself really envious of is of people who get to be just kind of willfully, not willfully, but just who get to be kind of ignorant of all of the things that can go wrong and who just, get pregnant, immediately release an announcement, never have a moment of fear for their entire pregnancy. Like that's so foreign to me at this point that I'm just like, I kind of forget that happens.
I no, I'm the same way. I mean, and I have living children now too. And even now, like the pregnancy announcements still sometimes sting. It's
Hmm.
weird. Like it's like it stays with you. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I always feel like super happy for other people in like the infertility and loss community. Like
Oh
those
yeah.
don't hurt as bad. I'm just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
so happy for you. But like
Yeah.
people who don't struggle, which I know that sounds bad, but I'm just like, oh, okay, good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so far out of the realm of that. Yeah, for me, it's sometimes jealousy, and it's also just it's so alien to me that I have sometimes I think I'm not as happy because it's just really hard to relate.
Yeah, I think that's it too, is we just want to have that feeling of like you said, like let's just get pregnant, be happy, and like, not go through all the crap that we had to go through to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you kind of briefly went over it, but do you
Hmm.
want to talk about your journey a little bit more? Like, how it
Sure.
started and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in just for context, we're in Western Canada. And access to reproductive services has definitely improved, but still a little bit limited. When we started, there were the only fertility clinic in our area had recently stopped offering services. So the only place that we could go was a town that's a couple of hours north of where we are. And it was just like a gynecologist who did sort of IUIs on the side. So and definitely, seemed to be trying his best, but also, it was things like the clinic wasn't open on weekends. So if you ovulated on a Friday, you could try on a Monday, but chances were pretty low and all of that. And, some of the not great sort of practices that we now know are really common, the form that we signed when we went in, at this point having no knowledge that we had any sort of infertility issues beyond the fact that we were lacking sperm, you know, but we still had to sign a form saying, if we had any problems, then we agree to lose, I think it was 25 pounds before they'll do any investigations, including blood work. Like that was just their starting point at this clinic. So it
Always
was kind
about
of
the
a mixed
weight.
bag. Yeah. But yeah, so that was our kind of initial experience. And this was myself trying to be the carrier at this point, the gestational parent. So we did, I think, 5 or 6 IUIs there because there wasn't anywhere else to go again at that point. We did have what we think now was one quite early loss and otherwise had kind of no success. It turns out most likely because I have PCOS and my body really struggles to ovulate on its own. So I don't think a lot of those cycles had any chance. But then, kind of towards the end of that journey, a clinic opened up in Edmonton, which is the city that we lived in at that point. So we started going there, and compared to the sort of experience that we'd had, it seemed like a whole new world. They did things like scans and blood work and that kind of investigation. So we felt a lot more confident, and sure enough, it seemed like everything was going to go great. The first round of IUI that I did there, this time with some injectable medications, we got pregnant. So it seemed like, okay, the problem was the clinic, we're all set. Right from kind of the beginning of that pregnancy, there were some signs that things, I had a lot of spotting, which is not always, a sign that something is going wrong, but sort of the volume and the frequency of blood I was seeing didn't make me feel great. And I just kind of knew, it was one of those situations where everyone around you is telling you, you need to just relax. We'd been for a few signs during some of the instances of spotting, and there was nothing, no problems that we could see, but I just knew. And eventually, we went for an appointment with the midwife right at the beginning of the second trimester, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. So we went in for a confirmatory scan, and it turned out that we had lost our baby right kind of around, yeah, the start of the second trimester. So yeah, that was it's it's hard to explain. It's hard to put into words, and it's funny because I talk about it a lot now as part of what I do for a living, and there's still a way in which it kind of the experience sort of evades language, but we were very lucky. We're especially very close to my parents, so we kind of leaned on them a lot for support, and we had a lot of friends at that point who kind of rallied around us. We found as our infertility journey continued, those friendships kind of petered off. That was one of the kind of unexpected side effects of the journey. But at that point, we had support, and so it was devastating, but we kind of made it through. And we had one unsuccessful cycle, one IUI after that, and then conceived what eventually turned into our son. And then I was supposed to be done. That I was supposed to be retiring from my role. I had also had a very hard pregnancy. I never know how to pronounce it still, hyperemesis gravidarum. Like I threw up the
Oh,
entire pregnancy, and I had gestational diabetes at the same
oh.
time.
So it just
So
hits
it
you
was
from
it
all
was
sides.
yeah, it was just a nightmare. I would inject myself with insulin right before a meal and then immediately proceed to throw up the meal. So then my blood sugar would tank. Like it was just, so I was super excited to be done. Anytime we went anywhere, I would say to my wife, like, oh, your turn next. I'm almost done. I was so excited. And she would like, I had not been that excited for the embodied part of pregnancy. I really wanted a baby, and my wife was not ready to kind of do the physical, the carrying side of that at that point. So that was why we had gone with me first. I wanted the baby, but I did not want the pregnancy. My wife desperately had wanted to be pregnant, for that had been a dream of hers. So when our son was around 1.5 or 2, and it was time to get started with her, she was so excited. And unlike me, who my family has, some kind of history of loss and of reproductive kind of complications. So with me, we had anticipated that there might be problems. With her, there was absolutely no signs. So we were betting, on this easy journey. It was going to be completely different than with me. And again, it kind of seemed like that was going to be the case. She got pregnant on her first IUI. And so it seemed like kind of smooth sailing. And then we got the blood work back from our betas, and they were not rising quite as quickly as we would have liked, but still, I didn't, even after everything that we had been through with me, I didn't feel nervous. I felt like this is her body, it knows what it's doing. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. And we lost that baby. We're not sure still at this point if it was an ectopic pregnancy or what kind of issues were there. But I think we made it to about 7 weeks before that loss. And that ended up being a kind of pattern. We still don't know why. We still don't have kind of answers exactly about what's going on for my wife and why she encountered the problems that she did. But she did, yeah, 5 or 6 IUIs, and then we moved to IVF. And again, this moment of like, okay, well, we weren't expecting that, but IVF is going to be fine. At this point, IVF was still a new part of the journey to us. It wasn't something I'd had to do. So we still very much viewed IVF as like almost a guarantee. So that they retrieved about 25 eggs. So it seems like, we were in good shape. And then they called us the next day and let us know that basically it had kind of catastrophically failed in terms of the next step. So even with rescue ICSI, with which they did, we had one viable embryo at the end of that, and that didn't take. So our clinic was very good, very supportive. They were able to kind of help us financially to do another retrieval, and we did a few more attempts, and again just kept getting these. We would get a positive pregnancy test. The betas just wouldn't. They would rise really slowly, and there would be another loss. So, some of them got farther than others. We had one that we were really optimistic about, and that the first beta was a lot higher. So we felt like, okay, this is it. And it, yeah, I can't, having been on both sides of this now, in terms of, being the one trying to carry and being the support person, I have to say, I had no concept of how hard the support role was, what it would be to watch my partner suffer and struggle and do all of these things that many of the people listening are going to be familiar, right? The progesterone and oil and the constant shots and trying, with a living child to sort of regulate your emotions and get out of bed when you really don't want to get out of bed because you're going through another loss on Christmas Eve, one of them, just yeah, so that is definitely one of the biggest lessons that I learned, because I really felt going into kind of transitioning to that role, like, well, I've done pregnancy. Like that was the hard part. This is going to be fine. And I struggled way more. And there are a lot of things that I feel like, looking back in retrospect, I would definitely do differently as the support person. If I have regrets, they're mainly about my role in that position. So we eventually decided. We did a lot of soul searching, and there are still investigations that could be done, but they are not available in our province. And this was kind of, while COVID was still ongoing, so traveling out of province was not only going to be expensive, it was also going to be kind of risky. And we were kind of starting to run pretty low on funds as far as that went. So we decided, okay, well, we'll do a couple of rounds of IUI with me, because our clinic was kind of full for IVF patients at that point. We were going to have to wait anyway. So we figured, okay, instead of doing nothing, we'll do a couple of rounds of IUI with me, see if it takes, and if not, we'll do maybe some reciprocal IVF in the new year. And the second IUI took and eventually turned into our daughter. So, it's I think when, when you look at our family, we are incredibly, we're very blessed. We have two living children. It didn't look like it was going to be that way for a very long time. And our son is the most doting older brother. We had some anxiety about what a 5-year age gap would be, because that's about how far apart they are in age, how long we were kind of trying there. And he could not love this baby more. They are thick as thieves already, and we're so grateful. And it also, it just leaves traces, it leaves trauma, and there's just so many parts of it. I feel really guilty that I was able to conceive when, my wife wanted that experience so much more than I did. Yeah, there's a lot of, and I can kind of go into some parts of that more depending on what you want to talk about. But yeah, it's there's always that grief doesn't leave, that sort of ambivalence in those responses, like we were talking about with pregnancy announcements. They don't sort of vanish the moment you get sort of where you initially wanted to be, because that journey stays with you, and those feelings that are held in your body, in your heart, in your brain, those, you're a different person at the end of the journey, even if you really don't want to be. And I remember really strongly, we saw a psychologist after our second trimester loss, and I remember her saying, you're never going to be the person that you were before this happened. And I remember just like the visceral anger that I felt at her for saying this to me, because like I had already lost my baby. How dare you say, that I'm going to lose me? But I mean, it's true. You do lose not just, your babies, your embryos, whatever kind of stage you're at, but you lose who you were, you lose, there's all these, friendships, or all of these other kind of losses that can kind of come along with it, that you're not expecting, that no one really prepares you for. So yeah, it's a tough journey, and I think it's one that we're still, that people like you and I and so many others are still trying to figure out how to support people through, how to even kind of recognize and give voice to them, so that people know they're not alone when they're experiencing them.
Yeah, well, you've
I talked for a long
definitely,
time. I'm
no,
sorry.
that's okay. I mean, y'all have definitely been through so much. And, I never really thought of it that way too, that, especially when it's two women that both want to carry, that, you will take on the role of being the one to carry and also being the support person. So it's like a unique
Hmm.
perspective that traditional couples like don't have.
Yeah.
And I say
Yeah,
that quotes.
absolutely. No, no, I get what you mean. And I mean, I think, I've seen recently some conversations about this where, people are coming down hard on support folks, and especially support folks who happen to identify as men, and saying like, well, they're not willing to put the work in, what's wrong with them? But like, I also think that there's not a lot of support for support people. We don't talk to people, especially men, who also then have the sort of gender stuff of, normative masculinity going on there, but we don't talk about this is women's stuff. So I think there's a lot that goes into why support people are sometimes not doing the job that we might want them to do as the gestational partner. And it's not, or it's rarely, I think, out of sort of just, laziness or malice. It's because no one teaches us how to do these things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we want them to be there for us, but we don't always tell them how or what we
Yeah.
need, but it's like, but you should
Hmm.
know, you should just,
Hmm.
you should just do it. But,
Yes.
I've learned, like, how would they know if we don't tell them? They can't read our
Hmm.
minds even when we think they can.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you deal with many insensitive comments, along the way? Like, the one we hear a lot, like, you should just adopt, or, oh, I wish they were early losses, or, did you deal with any of those kinds of things?
We did. I mean, we didn't get the adopt one very much. We did get a lot of sentences that started with at least, and one guideline that I tend to try to give people is just like, if you're starting a sentence that way to a lost parent or someone struggling with infertility, just like stop right there. If it starts with at least, just don't say it.
Like, you're already wrong.
Um,
Just say
yeah.
it.
But honestly, I think our experience was actually more that people were just afraid to say anything. So they just didn't, and especially as the journey went on, it was like I said, at first, with that first loss, this was a tragedy. This was, people wanted to be there. People really rallied around us. And then the longer the journey took, the more people kind of just faded out of our lives, the more people didn't want to ask, the more people didn't want to hear it. And to some extent, I get it. It's exhausting for the update to always be like, well, we lost another, baby. We're still struggling. I get that, but it's also exhausting to live it, right? So it's hard because it's those moments where you need the most support as things are kind of going on and repeating the same things. It's hard that those are the moments, when people stop trying to say anything.
That is hard. And I think people, like you said, they don't understand. Like, it is exhausting to live it. Like, we don't want this to
Hmm.
be our life. We don't want to be
Yeah.
talking about this all the time. We don't want to be giving those updates that it didn't work again or that we had another loss. Like,
Hmm.
we're not like happy having fun over here, like having
Yeah.
these conversations either. So,
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about other things that people kind of said, but yeah, for the most part, what I remember is the sort of the silence. There were some, especially as time went on with my wife trying a lot, there were people who really kind of wanted, well, if it worked for you to carry, why are you not just switch, so like there was a way that we were treated as kind of interchangeable because we both had uteruses, that there was kind of this ignorance and this not considering, what it would mean to my wife to have to stop, to not be able to carry, to sort of give up on that part of the journey. And yes, eventually that is what we did, but it was a devastating decision. My wife has not and likely will never carry a child, and the two living children that we have don't replace that, don't sort of take the pain of that away. We love them, and eventually, for all kinds of reasons, we needed to sort of privilege having a baby over the sort of method of who was carrying it. And I don't think either of us regrets that at all. But but the sort of way that people sometimes treated it as like, whoa, how great that you have a spare, just switch back over to Megan, as if it was nothing, was very hard.
I feel like people think, I mean, they don't understand that, just because it's two women and not a man and a woman, that like both women could want to carry, both women could
Hmm.
not want to carry, one could, one couldn't. Like,
Hmm.
it's not just about, hey, we both have this. We'll just, like, it's not that simple.
Hmm. Exactly.
Did you face any insensitive comments or any extra barriers because you are the same sex?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, right from the beginning, that first doctor that I talked about that we were seeing, anytime he was talking about the process, he couldn't do it without comparing it to normal. So, normal people would do it this way. What we're going to do is this. And there's a requirement here. I'm not sure if it's similar in other countries, but here there's a requirement that if you are using donor gametes, you are required before your clinic can treat you to see a psychologist for one session. And the psychologist that we saw was perfectly nice, but she had absolutely no experience or like knowledge of this process. So we spent the entirety of this session educating her, her asking questions like, okay, so what does open ID mean? Or, okay, so how do you pick a sperm donor? What goes into that process? So, like, I'm glad that she learned a lot. But,
Now,
for
how much this
us,
helped us, though.
yeah. And I mean, you're paying for that session that is required. So it felt frustrating, as a same-sex couple who has to use donor gametes to sort of be in this position of being forced to be there. And I have, to be clear, no issues with, mental health support. I'm actually, partly because of all of this, training to be a psychologist right now, because I really feel like the more of this work that I do, the more I feel like, yes, we need all kinds of fertility support, but we need mental health support so badly in
Yeah, that's
fertility from
amazing.
people who know and understand that part of the journey. So yeah, it's not at all that I resent sort of being told that we should seek support, but it was hard to be in this position of being forced when other people are not, to kind of be there because we were using donor gametes, and then have someone who had no idea what was actually, what was going on with that, what was involved, what some of the sort of terminology that was very basic, for us actually means. So that was challenging. And one other moment really stands out for me. We were at the clinic in Red Deer, and this was a couple of days after the homophobic violence, the shootings at Pulse nightclub in Orlando. So we are partway through an IUI. My legs are in the air. They are starting to insert the catheter to inject the sperm. And the nurse decides that this is the moment that she wants to start asking us about our feelings about this, about the shootings at Pulse. What was that like? And, why are people who are not American responding so strongly? Why is this so important? I'm just, it's already not the experience that other people kind of get to have to make a baby, right? There's nothing romantic about this. You're in a doctor's office, you're being injected with a catheter. So it's already not that. And then you're being asked about, this kind of devastating moment for your community. So some of these weren't sort of insensitive comments about the actual fertility aspect of things, but it was just all of these ways in which people are not kind of knowledgeable or not considering kind of your reality and how it might be different, or thinking about how to, take this medicalized moment of the IUI and make it, as pleasant, as kind of special for the couple as possible, instead of taking this moment to say like, hey, you are 2SLGBTQIA plus. Can you tell me about this gun violence and how it affects you?
And you're like, this isn't really the time. Like, read the room.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I did go through one IUI, so like I completely understand like how, and it's already like stressful anyways. And in your head, you're like, oh, like I hope this all works. I hope this is all worth it. And it's like you're just like exposed, vulnerable. Like, don't be asking me questions like
No.
about this.
No, definitely not.
So, are there any particular ways that you found to help with your grief after going through loss?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few, like I said, we were very close to my family, and they were there for kind of everything. They helped us. We had at that point cleared out a room that was supposed to be the baby's nursery, and they helped us, buy, not a whole ton of stuff, but just some furniture to turn it into like a space to enjoy being together, the two of us. So we got like a big table to do puzzles and board games and that kind of stuff, and use that room for that way, so that it wasn't just this like glaring reminder of what wasn't there. We I had a really well, we both had a really hard time with quiet. I normally I don't like just sort of noise. Well, I mean, now I'm completely different because I have kids, so it's noisy all the time, and I just kind of block it out. But at that point, I didn't typically enjoy sort of just having a lot of background noise, but I couldn't stand quiet. So we had the TV on Brooklyn Nine-Nine specifically,
Love
because
that
people
show.
sometimes ask me about sort of media. For us, it was Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I will always, I have complicated feelings about police and policing and all of that, but I will forever hold that show very, very closely to my heart, because we had it on all the time, including, when we went to sleep, just so that it wasn't quiet. And I remember very distinctly the first time that my wife laughed after the loss was during that show. Charles Boyle was talking about his buttholes because he gets shot in the bum. And I
I
remember her
remember
laughing, and I remember
that.
just this feeling of like, oh my God, we're gonna laugh again, and just how profoundly grateful I was for that knowledge, and to the show for kind of facilitating that moment. So that was kind of big for us. Another thing that we did, and a lot of people were very surprised by it and really advised us against it, was we went to Disney World. Now, Disney World is, of course, populated, or not populated because they don't live there, but there are a lot of kids at Disney, right? So a lot of people really advised us, like, oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go there. It's going to be too hard. But Disney had already kind of long been a really special place for us to go. We had been there a few times, including the sort of first vacation that we went on once we were out as a couple, with my family. So it was somewhere that we held very, very dear to us, and that I was also always cold, I remember, which can be a common kind of physiological thing that happens for people after a loss. But yeah, I wanted to be warm. I wanted so desperately to be warm. And if you want to warm up, Florida is a very good place.
It is, yes.
So we went. And I mean, there were moments that were hard. It was hard to, look over at the stroller parking area and see this sea of strollers parked. Like there were things about it that were hard. I'm not going to sort of idealize that, but it was the right decision for us. It was somewhere that meant something to us, and it also felt like, we were still trying to be hopeful a little bit too and say, one day we will be here with kids. So I highlight that because I think sometimes we have these sort of dominant narratives about what recovering from loss should look like or what things are going to be hard, or and one of those things is like, that it's hard to be around kids. It's hard to be around living kids, and it can be, and for some people it's completely impossible, right? Some people cannot be around living children for a while after a loss, and that's fine. I'm not at all kind of negating that or saying that there's anything wrong with that, but that's also not everyone's experience either. And it's okay, to want to be around kids or to want to go somewhere like that where kids are going to be, if that's what's right for you. And that was very much right for us. I'm really glad that we went. I'm really glad that we took that time with each other to kind of reconnect, and that we were able to kind of be near kids and kind of feel like, this would one day be us, but without kind of interacting too directly either. Because I think I would have actually had a harder time if we had spent a lot of time with, like, nieces and nephews or something. I think that would have been more challenging than sort of faceless, nameless kids who were like there in the background, but not kids I had to sort of directly interact with. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like being one with a kid, or like one that's like the age your kid should be, or things like that. I always found
Mm-hmm.
harder, but
Mm-hmm.
kids who are just other people's kids over at the grocery store, like not quite as hard. Some moments
Mm-hmm.
are still hard, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I think you're right about the nameless kids. Like you can keep them
Yeah.
at a distance almost.
Exactly. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, also sometimes families in Disney World are having a hard time with each other. So sometimes it was even a little bit comforting,
You're
which
like,
sounds awful, right? But like to sort of watch families struggle and also realize that, like, yes, I want children. Yes, it will be wonderful. And also sometimes having kids is really hard too. Like I took a little bit of comfort in that.
no, I understand that though. I mean, yeah, not that I ever like, laugh at other people, but it's like especially now after having been through all those tough times myself, when I'm like, oh, these kids will not cooperate. But yeah, it is kind of like, okay, like if it's gonna happen, but it's not all like all joy all the time. Sometimes there's
Yeah,
frustration and, you know, other things that go along with having kids.
exactly.
So, were you a doula before all of this, or did you become one after?
Yeah, I became one after when we started trying to conceive, we were both PhD students in English. So very different trajectory. And actually, to be 100% honest, kind of going into this, I used to find pregnancy like a little bit gross. like, like I said, I wanted the baby, and I wanted the baby now. And we knew that I was more likely to kind of have problems. So there were all kinds of reasons for me to go first. But like if you had asked me 10 years ago what I was going to be doing with my life, this would have been nowhere on my radar, and I would have laughed at you if you had told me. We ended up, both of us, leaving our PhD program before completing it, in part kind of related to these issues, to kind of the traumas. And also, the university had kind of resumed in person teaching as we were still trying, and we didn't want to be kind of taking on the sort of risk of that when we were still trying to have a baby. So we both left our programs, and I was kind of left feeling like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I increasingly kind of felt like, I had all of these skills with critical reading, with research, with communicating, complex ideas to people, and I wanted to use those. But I didn't want to just be talking to other academics, which is often what we end up doing in PhD programs or as professors. I wanted to be talking to people, and I wanted to be talking to people about kind of issues that really felt urgent and important. And that's when I kind of realized that this thing I had over here with all of that knowledge and skills could be related to all of this stuff over here, all of these things that I had unwillingly learned about fertility and how to advocate for yourself and all of those things, that I could actually put those things together. And I wasn't actually sure if the job even existed. I remember Googling like, is a fertility doula a thing? And it is a thing. I did my training and I'm still actually finishing it up through Doula Canada, who have a number of really great programs. They have the fertility doula program, also kind of birth and postpartum. They also have a menopause doula program, which I think is so
That's
cool.
really cool. That's
Yeah,
needed.
yeah. So yeah, that was definitely not a long held dream of mine and very much kind of organically came out of wanting to kind of bring together these parts of my life that I'd always held really separate until that point. There was the fertility stuff and there was the academic stuff and I didn't want to hold them separate anymore.
I feel like loss changes like our priorities. It can like, I mean, like it makes like I changed jobs shortly after my loss, still the
Oh,
same like
really?
line of work, but like I
Hmm.
just needed a new place like to be.
Hmm.
But yeah, I feel like a lot of us have found like a new purpose or a new job or a new just something because we realize either like the things we thought mattered don't matter as much or that we found new like better priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, sometimes, at least I have initially been inclined to read that negatively, like, oh, I can't, it's not even just that I, don't want to go to the place where I had the scan confirming the loss. Like now I can't even go to my job because, and sometimes it's that, right? Sometimes it's about trauma and it's about remembering that, oh yeah, I cried in my car in this parking lot before, sometimes it's that. But I think I also find the concept of post-traumatic growth really empowering too, right? That sometimes out of these horrible things that happen, it's not that it's a good thing that it happened. It's not that we should be grateful. It's not any of that because post-traumatic growth sometimes gets used in really gross ways that I really don't like. But that there can be these things that come out of these losses that can be positive. I think I truly think that I am a significantly better person and especially a better partner than I would have been if we had not gone through these things. And and yeah, and looking at things like the job that I've chosen, I think in academics, my experience was that a lot of it, there's so much ego in it. I was always worried about, do I seem like the smartest person in the room or, how can I make sure that everyone knows I did the readings and the supplemental, like all of this kind of really ego driven stuff. And it's like you said, those things, when you've been through some of this, they don't matter. They almost instantly don't matter. Like it's just like a switch flips and it's just like, I could not care less about this anymore. Um, so I'm not grateful that these things happen, but I'm very grateful that I've sort of processed them and that my wife and I have kind of worked together to move through these things in a way that has allowed us to kind of continue to grow and change and build new meaning because that also feels like a way of keeping our babies close to us, that they might not be here, they might not be in our arms, but they're very deeply a part of who we are and the journey that we've been through. And so being able to kind of think about all the ways that my life has changed also feels like a way that I'm still honoring them.
I completely relate to that. I feel the same way. Like, everything that I do, I try to do for Jasmine.
Hmm.
So like I like to feel like it's my way of keeping her close and it's our way of still parenting them when we can't parent them here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I always hate like I hate when people say, "Oh, you're so strong for going through that," and all that. But at the same time, I really do feel like a lot of us in this community are super super strong people. But don't tell me that. But I do feel that.
Well, because we are, but none of us wanted to be. So I think for
Right.
me that I have a hard time with that too, because it feels like you're being congratulated for something that you really didn't want to do at all.
Right? You're like, yeah, none of us chose this, okay? We all
Hmm.
choose to not be strong. I'll choose to be like weak and have my baby, please.
Yes, 100%.
But I do feel that way about a lot of people. I just won't tell them that, right?
Hmm.
So, is there anything else that you would like to share or add?
Um, I mean, we covered so much ground. You asked such great questions. Um,
I know it's such a big open-ended question because sometimes I feel like there's just like so much I want to say, but then I don't know what to say. So then I just end up saying nothing else. I'm like, I don't know, there's too much.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should just recognize that currently as we're speaking, it is Pride as well. And it is my first time because I didn't use social media for a long time. I kind of stopped using it actually during our whole journey. I just really had very little desire, but I do use it now as part of my business. So it's the first time that I have been on, Instagram for something like Pride and used the hashtags. And it's hard. It is hard to be on social media and kind of as a 2SLGBTQIA plus person and see some of what's happening in those spaces when you do post about those things. So I just wanted to, I guess, take a moment to wish everyone in our community a very happy Pride, and also recognize that if you're not feeling happy, because the post that garnered all of these negative responses was me saying, like, listen, if you're in this community and you're struggling with infertility and you're not sort of feeling pride in the traditional way that people think about pride, like, yay, it's so great, and that's okay. I had a hard time with pride during our journey. I had a hard time feeling like, all of some of which I talked about, right? It's hard to feel proud when someone's asking you about people in your community being shot while you're having an IUI. It's hard to feel pride when your journey is constantly being compared to normal people. Like, all of those things make that experience really hard. But pride is also not just about those kind of positive feelings of being proud. We say all the time that pride started as a riot, and it did. And it's important to kind of remember that and hold space for that, because pride is also about recognizing and validating and working in meaningful ways to make change to all of these aspects of being in a marginalized community that suck, that are hard, and that don't have to be hard, and that could be different. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really great to point out because, being proud of who you are and all that doesn't mean that you're never going to be upset or frustrated or sad at whatever your life circumstances are. So
Hmm.
you can be both. They're not I'm trying to think of the word. They could be exclusive, like, what I
Yeah,
mean.
exactly.
So yeah, I think that's great advice. Well,
And
I
I just wanted to say thank you also, Sarah, for all of the wonderful work that you're doing. I think you honor Jasmine every day with the incredible work that you're doing, the outreach that you're doing, the connections that you're forming, and the community that you're building. And I just wanted to say thank you and celebrate you as well.
well, thank you. That means a lot to me. That always makes my day. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing your story with us. I always think it's so important to talk about all of the different beliefs and stereotypes that we often hear about both infertility and loss. For instance, Megan mentioned that before going through IVF, she viewed it as an almost guarantee. This is a belief that so many people have, and I used to also be one of these people. They just don't really talk about how it fails so often, or that it can take multiple rounds, or that simply getting pregnant doesn't mean the baby is always coming home. And I also thought it was interesting to discuss how people assume that in a two-female relationship that there are two uteruses, meaning, again, almost a guarantee that you'll have a baby. But it doesn't take into account that both could have infertility, or that one may not be able to get pregnant for whatever reason, or may not want to get pregnant. It just comes down to never making assumptions about people and their journey. Don't discount their feelings about their situation, whatever that situation may be. Our journeys are so much more complicated and complex than what they appear. We just truly never know what people are going through. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.